Who doesn't love giant monsters? Kaiju, giant monsters. They've been around for decades, and we love them. From King Kong to Godzilla, to Gamera, to the many giant beasties of Pacific Rim, we love giant monsters, specifically the king of the monsters, Godzilla. I freaking love Godzilla, big fan of Godzilla. And seeing as how this is October, the month of monsters and mayhem and mischief, I thought, why not do a top 10 specifically for my favorite giant monsters from video games. Video games have been full of unique and big baddies. We've got robots, aliens, demons, mutants. There are a whole lot of nasties we battle in our video games. Some of them come in kaiju size. Now, seeing as how this is a very special top 10, there are a few very special rules. 1. The monsters must be big enough to be considered kaiju. I mean, these must be giant monsters. Using the giant monster kings, King Kong and Godzilla, for a size scale. Second note, this is a very special top 10 about giant monsters in video games, or enemies in video games, or creatures in video games that are giant enough to be considered kaiju. These are not the top 10 biggest boss battles. This is not a top 10 of who is the biggest, who is the largest, which is why you will not see Kronos from God of War on this list. This is not a list of comparing sizes or who is the biggest monster. And third and final note, this is all personal opinion. These are my top 10 favorite giant monsters from video games. If you don't agree, well, too bad. But just cause you don't agree doesn't mean you can't enjoy the video and love video games and giant monsters all the same. Okay, enough delaying. Let us begin with the top 10 giant monsters or kaijus from video games. Let her rip, big guy! Number 10. Ogroman, Resident Evil 6. It is amazing, simply amazing, how many horrid monstrosities can be created with one biological virus. The Ogroman is one of those monstrosities, and it is a big one. While indeed still retaining some humanoid features, the Ogroman is still far from human. What with its deformed, gaping mouth, its dead, soulless black eyes, and that weird, I don't even know how to describe that weird thing on its back. Every time the Ogroman shows up in Resident Evil 6, you are in for a fight. You are in for one hell of a challenge. One that is both tense, epic, and fun. While the Ogroman does not possess any special abilities, it does of course have super strength, and every time this thing walks, the earth shakes with it. It may not be the most giant of giant monsters, but it still sure as hell is a monster. And, speaking of which, on the giant monster scale, while the Ogroman would easily be crushed by Godzilla, the Ogroman does stand a fighting chance against King Kong. Number 9. Goliath from Prototype 2. The creation of Alex Mercer using his power and knowledge of the Black Light virus to its worst, creating the hulking, monstrous Goliath. When a Goliath shows up in Prototype 2, it represents one thing: an epic event and a battle of epic proportions. When a Goliath starts on its rampage across town, it is guaranteed that vehicle and person alike will go flying into the air. as well as explosions covering the entire area where the Goliath walks. When the Goliath shows up in Prototype 2, it really does feel like it's turned into sort of a monster movie, as every single military soldier will start shooting at the thing, and missiles will go flying trying to take it down, bullets and missiles constantly littering the Goliath, but doing jack squat to it. Meanwhile, the Goliath has an appearance that's just as threatening, if not more threatening, than our previous entry, the Ogroman, with the Goliath's misshapen, distorted, disgusting, and disfigured body, his giant, irregular arm, and just grotesque face. It does somewhat resemble what once was, could have been a human being. Oh, but hell, not anymore. For being such a massive beast, the Goliath is surprisingly light on its feet, can jump high in the air to perform a body slam, and can move at high speeds whenever it wishes, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. When you confront a Goliath, James Heller starts to feel an awful lot like David. And on the giant monster scale, while once again the Goliath would be absolutely crushed by Godzilla, it does stand more than a fighting chance against King Kong. Number 8. The Threshold Guardian from Dark Void. Guarding what seems to be the last and only portal left in the Void to get back to Earth, the Threshold Guardian makes a surprising and epic entrance as the final boss of Dark Void. While there is little to no build-up for this final encounter with this giant, three-headed, robotic, alien dragon, it more than makes up for it with the fact that it's a three-headed, robot, alien dragon. I cannot express enough how the design of the Threshold Guardian is simply astounding. So much detail, so much art style and creativity and imagination in this creature. I just wish there was more build-up or lore to it. Doesn't change facts though, that this final boss battle, while a bit on the short side, is pretty epic and shows off the grand scale and power of the Threshold Guardian. Attacking with blasts of energy, fire, or just trying to kill the protagonist Will with charging high speeds and its massive claws. The Threshold Guardian is both a cool-looking and threatening opponent. It's one of the many giant monsters in video games that show video game creatures, and giant monsters included, can be as imaginative and creative as our minds allow it. While admittedly, again, little build up to the Threshold Guardian, and it does have kind of an anticlimactic feel to the boss battle, the size, scope, and just overall design of the Threshold Guardian more than makes it worthy enough to be put on this list. And as for the giant monster scale, once again, this monster would be completely eviscerated by Godzilla, but does stand more than a fighting chance against King Kong. Number 7. Chuck, God of Rain, from Marlowe Briggs and the Mask of Death. While Chuck does have a similar problem to the Threshold Guardian, as there is little to no build-up to this giant monster, doesn't change the fact that his appearance is a shocking and imposing one. Basically resembling the love child of Satan and the Kraken, Chuck, God of Rain, is, as I said, imposing, with seemingly endless amounts of tentacles spewing from its body, one menacing, glowing, giant blue eye in the center of its head, and a mouth large enough to swallow any man whole. When immediately seeing the giant beast, one thing comes to mind: do not go into the water. Besides that, the battle with Chuck, the God of Rain, again, this is a god, the God of Rain, water, all that jazz. Our super-powered protagonist, Marlowe Briggs, must go up against the god of water itself, creating a simply epic confrontation of boss battle between Demigod Man and God Beast. While previous entries like the Ogroman and the Goliath were gruesome in the fact that they once resembled humans, Shock is terrifying and gruesome in the fact that he looks like your worst nightmare of a beast that dwells in the depths of the water. Shock may not have several abilities to fight you with, but he has several tentacles to take the place of that. The amount of Kraken and hentai jokes that can be made from this are limitless. In all seriousness though, those tentacles will tear you apart unless you tear them apart first. And finally, Shock, the God of Rain, his boss battle gives a real sense of just scale. You get the sense, the feeling that this thing is huge. You are confronting a giant monster. Shock gives you the feeling that you're up against seeing a giant monster. And seeing as how this list is all about giant monsters, I'd say he fits the part. And finally, on the giant monster scale, Shock God of Rain would be easily more than a match for King Kong and might be able to put up just a little bit of a fight with Godzilla. Number 6, the Warrior from Borderlands 2. Now this is a giant monster with proper build-up. One of the main focuses of the story is to stop Jack from opening the vault and unleashing the Warrior. This giant monster is built up from the get-go of the game. It's built up as a menacing opponent, one with great power, great size, and untold amounts of destructive capability. And from the get-go, we all know this is gonna be the final boss, no duh. And when the Warrior finally does make his appearance, it is an epic one. The Warrior is seemingly a giant lizard with skin made of rock and molten magma, with weird energy-like wings, and with a mighty roar in body size that is both intimidating and cool as hell. And surprisingly, the Warrior lives up to his name, being both a powerful and challenging combatant. Every time you go up against the Warrior, you know you're going to have a fun, challenging, and rewarding boss battle. The Warrior will do everything in its power to kill you, whether it be throwing fireballs at you, breathing fire at you, trying to crush you with its massive claws, slam you to death with its massive tail, or just using its massive weight to try and make the lava overflow over the arena and try to burn you to death. Everything about the Warrior is just epic. Its design is epic, its boss battle is epic, its build-up is epic. The Warrior is just an epic creature, an epic boss battle, and an epic giant monster. And on the giant monster scale, the Warrior would absolutely kill and destroy King Kong. King Kong would be no match for the Warrior. However, due to size, the Warrior would still be crushed by Godzilla. Number 5, the Guardian from Darksiders 2. Now some of you may argue whether this is a kaiju or not, a giant monster. Wouldn't it be more of a giant robot or magic robot? But lore-wise, the Guardian is technically the soul of a maker placed into a golem made of stone. So you know what? The Guardian can get away with being a giant monster since it is kind of technically a living thing. But enough of that, the Guardian itself. The Guardian, like the Warrior, has good build-up. Death is led to believe that by reawakening the Guardian, it will clear away the corruption, making way for him to get to the Tree of Life. Turns out, however, corruption runs deep, as the Guardian itself has been infected with corruption. Now, out of control, Death is forced to destroy the Maker's greatest creation, the Guardian. Oh, the boss battle. I think everybody who's ever played Darksiders 2 can agree that the boss battle with the Guardian is epic and a ton of fun. The Guardian, of course, is gigantic in size, and if Death is not too careful, he will easily be stomped or crushed. The Guardian also has a variety of projectiles to use against Death. The only way to actually injure the Guardian is to climb the giant beast and damage its crystal weak points. Once again, the Guardian, just like the Warrior, is just epic. The design of the Guardian, the design, so much beauty in its design, such imagination and creativity and artistic vision. This giant mechanized golem made of stone and magic. The Guardian, while being a very different kind of kaiju, a very different kind of giant monster, it's a giant monster nonetheless, and an epic one at that. And now onto the giant monster scale. The Guardian would actually put up a pretty good fight with King Kong, possibly even defeat him, while he would still be crushed by Godzilla. Number 4. Red-Eye from Lost Planet 2. Red-Eye makes those giant sandworms from Doom cower in fear. Red-Eye has one epic introduction, and to solidify just how much of a threat he is, you don't really get to fight or kill Red-Eye when you first encounter him. All you can do is try to separate as many train cars as possible, make your train go faster, and try to escape the giant alien. And just when you think you've lost the giant beast, later on it returns again. However, this time you have enough high-powered weaponry to stand a fighting chance. Red-Eye is everything a giant monster should be. He looks like a monster, like an alien, but does have a few similarities to real-life animals. He's menacing and threatening, creative and cool. And most importantly, he looks and feels big. And on a personal note, I just freaking love Red-Eye's design. The little mandibles at the bottom that have him moving around quickly through the sand. The giant beak or jaw he has for a mouth. And I just love the fact that it's like a reference, a recreation, and kind of a one-upping of the giant sandworms from Dune. As for the boss fight itself against Red-Eye, it is nothing short of epic. You have to use every heavy weapon in your disposal and try and hit his many tiny weak points. Either using the enormously powerful and large railway gun to do some massive damage, perhaps grabbing a helicopter and trying to fly around it, get up close as possible and shoot the weak points, or just using the mini gun turrets. Either way, you have lots of firepower, and you will be using every piece of ammo to try and take down Red-Eye. I can't express enough how awesome Red-Eye is, through his design, his size, and his boss battle as a whole. And now, onto the giant monster scale. Red-Eye would easily, utterly destroy King Kong, and he would even stand a bit of a fighting chance against Godzilla. Number 3. Lephantis from Warframe. While admittedly not as big as some of the other giant monsters on this list, Lephantis more than makes up for this with having one of the most terrifying, grotesque, and monstrous designs ever given to a giant monster. The result of Orokin Old War bioweapons, a surviving, infested organism that over the years has slowly built up and developed and empowered itself with more biological and infested material, becoming the intelligent and monstrous entity Lephantis. One of the very few infested boss battles in Warframe, Lephantis is easily one of the most epic and memorable bosses from Warframe. The first phase of the boss battle has you fighting his individual heads as they spew forth from the ground as tentacle-like creatures, with there being a Corpus head, a Grineer head, and an Ancient Infested head. the Corpus Head shooting projectiles, the Grineer Head with melee attacks, and the Ancient Infested Head shooting even more heavily damaging projectile attacks. After wearing down Lephantis' many heads, soon the floor collapses and reveals Lephantis as a whole, as the monstrous, free-headed, infested thing that it is. Speaking of the Thing, Lephantis gives off a real vibe of John Carpenter's The Thing, really adding to the scary factor of this creature as a whole. Now, in the final phase of Lephantis' boss battle, you must take out and destroy each individual head while avoiding all its attacks and trying not to get stomped on by its free, grotesque, and misshapen legs. Lephantis is many things. It's terrifying, it's creative, imaginative, monstrous, epic, a good boss battle, a memorable character, but most importantly, it's a giant monster, an awesome giant monster that's more than worthy of being put on the top 10 giant video game monsters of all time. And as for the giant monster scale, Lephantis could easily kill the great King Kong, but once again be stomped on by Godzilla. Number 2, the Dracolich from Castlevania Lords of Shadow. The Dracolich is a giant undead dragon. Nuff said, and my number 1 giant monster is, I kid. The Dracolich has a very menacing and epic introduction, as you find out that this whole time, that mountain that Gabriel was climbing and platforming on in the previous level was actually, well, a giant undead dragon. And when the Dracolich awakens, it's one epic boss battle. Like the other Titan boss battles in Castlevania, you have to try and actually latch on, and climb the creature itself. However, unlike the previous 2 Titans where you climb their bodies while they were just standing still, you have to climb the Dracolich while it's flying through the air. Let me repeat myself. You are climbing on and trying to kill a giant, flying, undead dragon. The amount of epic for this boss battle is off the charts. But as for the creature itself, the Dracolich is wonderfully, grotesquely, horrifically designed. This creature really looks like a fearsome, or once fearsome beast, now grown old and decaying and nothing more than rotting flesh in a giant skeleton. Only thing holding it together being necromantic magic. As for offensive capabilities, well, the Dracolich is huge. It merely needs to slam into you or run over you with its massive body. Or use this green electrical flame that it spews forth from its mouth that does some serious damage. In the end, however, the Dracolich is just epic, simply epic in scale alone. Besides the premise of a giant undead dragon, the Dracolich just looks and feels like a giant monster should. And as for the giant monster scale, the Dracolich would easily defeat King Kong, or at least put up a good fight with him. However, it would once again still easily be defeated by Godzilla. And before I reveal the number 1 giant monster from video games, here comes a giant recap. And the number one giant monster from video games is the Titan Loom from Sanctum 2. Literally, the entire main game of Sanctum 2 is just build-up towards the ending of the game and the jaw-dropping introduction of the Titan. And every single piece of DLC afterwards that continues the story of Sanctum 2 is all about one thing: try and find a way to stop and kill the Titan Loom. The Titan Loom is just awe-inspiring. It is easily the biggest, simply biggest, largest, most giant monster from video games ever. It is about the same size, if not taller, than Godzilla himself. I mean, just look at this thing! It's enormous! But right next to the size is the Titan Loom's simply breathtaking alien design. The design of this creature is so alien. It looks so familiar yet strange at the same time. I don't even have to talk about the offensive capabilities of this creature. Its size and strength alone decimates cities and structures everywhere it goes. But what easily made this the number one giant monster from video games is this. Every time the Titan is on screen, everybody, every player, always stops what they're doing and just looks in awe at the Titan. I did this. Every time the Titan was on screen, I stopped what I was doing. I stopped building towers. I stopped coming up with strategies on how to fight the waves of enemies. I just stopped everything I was doing and took a moment to just look up into the sky and see this towering, almost godlike alien just walk by. Just watching the creature, just watching the Titan just walk by is an event in itself, because it's so huge and larger than life, just like other giant monsters, such as Godzilla. Just seeing this giant monster, or just seeing giant monsters just walk, just move around, these giant things that we are so small compared to, just seeing them walk from place A to B is an event in itself. And that the Titan Loom is so easily able to provoke the feelings of awe and wonder. You just know the Titan Loom had to be the number one giant monster from video games ever. And now, before we end this video, it's time once again, finally, for the giant monster scale. Well, no duh, the Titan Loom would easily kill off King Kong. However, for the first time on this countdown, the Titan Loom would actually be a rival to the King of the Monsters, Godzilla himself. The Titan Loom would actually stand a fighting chance against Godzilla. Of course, Godzilla would, in the end, kick his ass, but the fact that this giant monster can even come close to putting up a fight with the King of the Monsters himself, all hail the Titan.